Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into a truly fascinating theological text. And honestly, what makes this source material so incredibly compelling is how it uses these brilliant, everyday natural metaphors to map out a clear, step-by-step process for spiritual transformation. It basically takes ancient wisdom and translates it into a highly practical guide for completely rewiring your heart and mind. All right, let's get right into it. Our source material is anchored entirely around Romans chapter 12. This specific verse sets up the core tension of the whole text, the problem of conforming to the pattern of the world versus the solution of actively being transformed. And how exactly does that transformation happen? Well, it's by the renewing of the mind. The text argues that this renewal is the exact thing that ultimately allows us to test and approve what God's good, pleasing, and perfect will really is.
Which brings us to Section 1, the call to transform, before and after.
Let's look at the framework to see exactly how the author visualizes this big change. They use some seriously vivid imagery to contrast our baseline state with our true potential. So on one side, we have what the text calls secular caterpillars. This represents a life of just conforming to the ways of the world, crawling along the ground, completely bound by earthly limitations. But on the flip side, through a life of worship and offering oneself as a living sacrifice, a person becomes a spiritual butterfly. The text paints this incredibly beautiful picture of taking flight in God's garden of love. It's not just a minor tweak, it's a complete, total metamorphosis of both form and function.
Now, to actually initiate this metamorphosis, the text points directly to the book of Colossians. The main idea here is that if you want to stop crawling and start flying, you have to fundamentally shift your perspective. You need to adopt the mindset of heaven rather than constantly being weighed down by earthly, secular concerns. The author notes that this requires a sort of death to the old way of living, which then allows your real life to be hidden with Christ.
So, the philosophical groundwork is laid. But how do we actually do this? That brings us to Section 2, Rewiring with Silence, Daily Habits.
This is where the text gets incredibly practical. According to the author, the actual mechanism for change kicks off with something that, let's face it, is pretty hard to come by in our modern, noisy world, the deliberate practice of silence. But the text doesn't just view silence as turning off the TV or having an absence of noise. It views silence as an active, intentional act of worship. It's in this quiet, still state that the Holy Spirit is actively invited in to start rewiring our thought patterns completely from the inside out.
While in this deliberate silence, we're taught to really observe our own minds. And the author cleverly coins a term for what we usually find lurking in there: ANTs, or automatic negative thoughts. And just like actual pests at a picnic, they act like weeds growing in our mental garden. If your ultimate goal is to cultivate a healthy garden of love, well, you've got to identify the weeds that are choking out the good plants, right?
So once you spot these mental weeds, the instruction definitely isn't to just sit back and watch them grow. Referencing 2 Corinthians, the text insists on taking action. We're instructed to actively take these automatic negative thoughts, these weeds, captive to Christ. It is a highly intentional, disciplined process where you absolutely refuse to let negative worldly patterns dominate your newly renewed mind.
But clearing out the weeds is really only half the battle. Let's move right into Section 3, Guarding the Heart, Emotional Transformation. Once the mind is cleared, a deeply internal emotional shift can finally take place. Using some truly beautiful imagery inspired by the book of Ezekiel, the author explains this kind of physiological shift of the soul. We start with stony hearts that have been completely hardened by all those automatic negative thoughts and worldly conformity. But by actively waiting for the Holy Spirit in silence, a seed of love is sown. This miraculously turns those stony, hardened hearts into tender, responsive ones. The soil of the heart is completely softened and ready for growth.
And to protect this newly transformed, tender heart, the text introduces a brilliant counterpart to those negative thoughts we talked about earlier. Enter POTS, or positive emotional thoughts. These are the absolute perfect antidote to those negative ANTs. But listen, these aren't just empty, feel-good affirmations. The text makes it very clear that these positive emotional thoughts have to be deeply rooted in the divine promises of God. Think of them as the healthy, vibrant plants you intentionally put into the garden once all the weeds are finally gone. This relentless focus on actively guarding our hearts is powerfully reinforced by Proverbs 4:23. The verse essentially says to guard your heart above all else because it determines the course of your life. The author is making a massive, direct link here. Our internal states literally determine the outward trajectory of our entire lives. I mean, you just cannot fly like a butterfly if your heart is weighed down like a stone. It just doesn't work. So the crucial takeaway here is that the author's entire psychological and spiritual rewiring process can be neatly distilled into 5 incredibly practical, actionable steps. Step 1. Practice silence. Step 2. Notice the ants, those automatic negative thoughts. Step 3. Take those pesky weeds captive. Step 4. Wait for the Spirit to soften the heart. And finally, Step 5. Guard that tender heart with PETs, the positive emotional thoughts anchored in God's promises. It's a completely brilliant cyclical engine for ongoing personal growth.
Now, if this explainer stopped right here, it would honestly just read like a self-help manual. But the text goes so much further in Section 4, Becoming the Body, Communal Action. This is exactly where the metamorphosis transitions from the inside out. The author makes it abundantly clear that the ultimate goal of all this inner rewiring isn't just to achieve some sort of personal zen or self-actualization. The real purpose of becoming a spiritual butterfly is to integrate your newly transformed self into something so much larger, the active body of the risen Christ. Personal transformation is ultimately meant to serve a massive communal reality.
Inside this communal structure, the text offers some incredibly practical guidelines from Romans chapter 12 to keep the community healthy and thriving. First off, it advises keeping the ego in check by measuring yourself by the faith God has given you, basically reminding us not to think we are better or more important than we really are. Secondly, it asks individuals to recognize that everyone is equipped with totally different gifts of the Spirit to do certain things well. The community absolutely needs the diverse, unique strengths of all its members to function properly.
Building on that, the author then cites 1 Corinthians to stress a really crucial point. This diversity of function, it's completely intentional. God works in very different ways in each individual, but is simultaneously at work in all believers. These different gifts are given specifically so that people can actually help each other share the love of God with the broader world. It's like a giant puzzle where every single piece is absolutely essential.
Drawing from Ephesians, the text then outlines the true anatomy of a healthy body, speaking the truth in love, recognizing Christ as the head, and fitting together perfectly so the whole community can grow in love together. That internal garden of love we talked about earlier, well, it has now blossomed into a whole thriving community of love.
The source text beautifully summarizes its entire arc with a final, incredibly hopeful prayer. Lord, may I be transformed to be a part of your body to shine your love in the world. It perfectly captures the entire journey, from the quiet, solitary silence of pulling those mental weeds, all the way to shining a unified communal love outward into the world.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with a thought based on the author's ultimate framework. You've seen the mechanics of moving from a secular caterpillar to a spiritual butterfly. So ask yourself this final question regarding your own personal journey. How will you use your uniquely rewired heart and your specific, incredible gifts to share love in the world? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable text with me today.